Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Testing Peers. Tonight we're going to talk about glue work and we'll go into that in a bit more detail later on. We have not everyone again. Unfortunately, Simon is not here, but we always give him a shout out anyway. So he is here in thought, but not actually present. But I do have with me Chris.
Hello, hello.
Russell.
Good day.
And another Testing Peer favourite. We've mentioned him in previous episodes. We have Vernon Richards with us.
Greetings.
And myself, David Maynard. Our episodes are, as always, sponsored by Saffron QA. We're delighted that they continue to sponsor us. Saffron QA is a specialist in testing recruitment, offering permanent contract and a newly developed retained recruitment service. More details can be found in the show notes, or please reach out to Ben directly to find out more. With our special guest, he's going to come up with a banter today. So over to Vernon.
Okay, what is your favourite book? But it's not a work-related book. Nothing to do with work. What's your favourite book? I have to think of the answer to my own question at this point.
It's one of the hardest parts. It's all right. The person who asks it gets to go last. You get the most time.
Excellent.
Since everyone's struggling to think, I guess I'll go first. And mine's by George Orwell. And it's not what you'd think it would be by George Orwell. It'll be Down and Out in Paris and London. Because it talks about poverty, talks about London and the working and how to work and the hard work and things like that. And it's just very well written, interesting insight into kind of a point in time.
I think I've probably got two because I can't have one. I like Jostein Gaarder's Sophie's World, which is a tale where they sort of have a nice little novel and stuff, and it's built around Sophie learning about philosophy and all sort of cool things around that. It's a really good book. And also Jonassen's book, The 100-Year-Old Man Who Steps Outside. Really fun book about a fictitious man in an old home who decides that actually he wants to go out and continue to live his life. And then it sort of goes back through history and he discovers that his obsession with blowing stuff up takes him around the world and he gets to sort of be part of some really major historical events. It's really fun. Not necessarily blowing stuff up, but my kids play Minecraft all the time and they think blowing up is awesome too.
Funny enough, I was going to suggest that book as well, because I think that you got me onto it, or we discussed it in a previous job.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so that was a really quite memorable book. But I would also go back to probably one of the Harry Potters. I really quite like the Harry Potters, as much because I actually quite liked it although I was an adult when they came out, but also sharing it with my daughters as well. It's sort of two reasons why I quite like that.
Are you allowed to have more than one?
I mean, I did. Straight
You're
away.
the question master. You can come up with however many.
David chose 7 books. He chose the Harry Potter books. Don't worry about it.
There's a few. There's a series of books called the Malazan Books of the Fallen. It's like a science fiction thing. And one of those books, I think it's called Dead House Gates. The storyline is so ridiculously complicated, I don't even know how to describe it, but it's about humans and gods and other different creatures, and some of these people can become gods, some of the gods lose their deity status, and it's all a bit crazy. And Dead House Gates is an awesome episode of that. And then there's another series of books called The Wheel of Time, which was recently turned into a series on Amazon Prime. Please do not watch that series. It's bloody awful. But the books are pretty good, except they get a bit crazy. They get a bit boring. Avoid book 10, I know that much. But one of them is called The Dragon Reborn. And I think the one before that is called The Great Hunt. They are absolutely awesome. Those two series are really good. Recommend if you like science fiction and fantasy.
Cool.
Well, that was a good podcast. Let's move on to glue work. I don't know if maybe you had ever heard of this term before, but I believe that I got turned into sort of investigating it by the same channel that Vernon did in our friend Cassandra Leung, sending over some stuff about glue work. Do you have a definition in your mind as to what glue work actually is that would be kind of a nice way for us to kick off?
My loose understanding is that kind of work that it isn't explicitly anybody's job to do, but if it doesn't happen, nothing is going to happen. Like the project or the product or the service or the thing that the team is doing is going to fail if this stuff doesn't happen. But it's actually not any one person's responsibility, at least on paper, explicitly to do. That's how I understand it.
And it's often not the work by which someone is measured a success or a failure in the workplace.
That is one of the key characteristics that was almost certainly going to come up later. Yeah. So what do you make of that then, that definition?
I think it's the thing that's very underestimated because it's the same as anything, the workings of your house. There are lots of tasks that need doing, like taking out the bins and cleaning and just general washing and tidying up. And if they don't get done, the whole house falls apart. But it isn't necessarily anyone's responsibility. It's a shared responsibility. And actually in the workplace, it's constantly like that. You should take out the trash. You should do things that just because it's etiquette and sensible stuff. And as you say, it's really difficult to measure. It's really difficult to actually put it down as a list as to what people's responsibilities are, because as you say, it's a shared responsibility, and people take from that what is deemed to be necessary because it isn't written down. And I can appreciate that actually putting a value on that or recognizing it is a really difficult thing to do.
Yeah, it's an interesting comparison that you made with housework. Apparently there's another characteristic of glue work is that if you have a team of men and women, generally the women will do the glue work, unless there are no women. And then suddenly the blokes actually get their shit together and do the glue work.
There's that thing, isn't there, about, oh, let's have a meeting. We need someone to take a minute. Let's find the woman. Like, that's kind of like the scenario that seems to happen. And then go, I'm not very good at that sort of thing. And it just ends on the lap of a woman, which has got some heavy issues with that alone. But it's not cool.
No. The thing that Chris said before was really interesting. So the reason I'm interested in this, okay, is because the market is now very keen on hiring people called quality engineers or quality coaches. And now we're being asked to spread out in all the different directions. So not just shifting left, we're shifting left, right, up, down, top, middle, all over the goddamn place. And that is kind of part of our job description. It's kind of just said, well, we want you to influence all of the SDLC. That's point number one. The next thing that's happening is, if you're an experienced tester or you're in one of these quality engineering or quality coaching roles, you're kind of more inclined to kind of poke your nose in where it's not wanted, shall we say. So traditionally, testers have been asked to take this product and interact with it and find problems with it. But I'm pretty sure once you've been doing that for a year or two or three or longer, or maybe if you're in the right environment, it would be shorter. But you start to realize that actually, maybe I can start to prevent some of these things from happening or impact these things from happening by operating somewhere else in the development lifecycle. Even though I'm a tester, I'm going to go over here because our requirements suck. Like, if we can get our requirements coming in more clearly or more thought out better, then there may be less problems to look at. Or maybe I can help my developer teammates craft or conceive of unit tests to implement. And then I won't have to do this testing through the front end, through the same goddamn widget that's on every client that we build, for example. So we kind of just do that naturally, but it's not interacting with the product, which is typically what we get hired to do, regardless of what it says on the job description. And then there's this concept of quiet quitting, which is people over the last year or two, particularly since the plague, shall we say, they're getting a bit fed up of going above and beyond their job description. And so they kind of say, do you know what? I'm just going to stick to what it says, binary. If it's in my job description, I'm doing it. If it's not in my job description, I'm not doing it. And I think there's a confluence of all of those things, which would explain some stuff that people are experiencing, particularly in our line of work. I think it's quite an interesting thing. I think even though we're being hired as quality engineers, there's a disconnect between what I would expect to be doing in that job and what the team or the company would expect me to do. Even if it's in my job description, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to be helping all over the place, like literally everywhere, anywhere that impacts the software, I'm going to be. And people are like, yeah, but this software needs testing. I'm like, yeah, but it doesn't. Like, it would be more impactful if I help with X. My go-to analogy is a plumber or some odd job individual, like somebody who could just fix all the things. And you say, there's a leak in the corner of my ceiling, like it's damaged, like there's a leak over there. And they come in and they're like, oh, all right, let's have a look. It turns out the leak is somewhere else and it's just the water running along all the bits and pieces. And then the damage appears over there. So I see the damage as being testing. It's like, I can work over there, but actually if I go fix the goddamn leak, then the testing will look different that I have to do over there. But everyone's like, no, get back in your box, tester. You will go and test this thing. I don't want to hear about the goddamn requirements. I want to hear unit tests. You're not a developer. Stop sticking your nose into that kind of thing. And that can be quite debilitating and utterly exhausting.
And demotivating.
Yeah, like, you know what, goddammit, I'm done. Like, if you tell me that's not my job, I'm sticking to my job. I'm going to show up at 9 a.m., not 8:59. Not even 8:58. No, no, no. Not 9:01. At 9. And I will finish at 5. If you tell me my lunch is 12 till 1 or 12 till 12:30 or whatever, that's what I'm going to do. And then cracks start to appear. Because what Chris said was really important is that another aspect of glue work is that because it's not necessarily recognized as part of your job, when it comes to compensation time and reward time and promotion time, you say, hey, I just helped the developers implement these unit tests. They're like, no, they didn't. David, the developer, he's the one who did all the unit tests. You weren't involved. You're like, wait, what? David didn't even know what unit tests were until I showed up. What are you talking about, man? Like, there were no unit tests when I got here. And that kind of thing. And that can be also soul crushingly annoying when you don't get the recognition again and again and again. So that's why I'm interested in glue work. I just talked for a long time. What do you all think?
There was a lot of nodding there, wasn't there?
Yes, we nodded again. It is interesting because the quality role, as you said, it's more about influencing wider and broader. It isn't execute a test script anymore. It is deemed to be kind of this influencing role. And I guess sometimes you have job descriptions that have that title, but then the job description is old school, I'll call it. And then there's a kind of conflict between the two. But even if the job description says one thing, the expectation of people can be completely different as well. So it's kind of this thing. I must admit, when I've worked, I've always had quite loose job descriptions, as in do test stuff. I think it's pretty much what my job description mostly have ever said. So you're right. Most people perceive that as executing test cases, not fixing the process, reducing the flaws, preventing bugs. But that is more value. So it is interesting. And is that glue work, though? Is that testing work? Is that quality engineering work? It's kind of a weird thing.
I think our perception of what our job is versus what a company might expect that traditional role to be can be quite difficult, because we're here saying, I'm wanting to help improve stuff. I want to bring my skills, bring my knowledge. I want to share those things with people, and I want to make everything better for everybody. I beat that quality is a team sport, the drum. I don't want all the glory. I want us all to be hooray together doing those things. But then somebody's going, yeah, but I'm measuring you against these little metrics just here. And you're going, yeah, I can do those things, but I want to do these other bits. And there's an element of scope around our work that I think I've been fallen victim to in the past. It's quite difficult because then you're like, but I can do that stuff. I want to do that stuff. No one's doing that stuff. It needs doing. And it's kind of like the seek forgiveness rather than asking permission sometimes, because you're thinking, big picture, this is the right thing to do.
I think you're right. I think that it is the big picture. And I think that goes back to communication. And as you say, Chris, it could be, well, after the event, you do something. But it's also adding value, making sure that you're adding something to the process. So therefore, although you might not be measured on it, it's proving to people that actually it is a valuable thing to actually do. And I don't see there any reason why testers shouldn't be able to do all that work, or to try and, we're testers after all. We want to investigate all aspects of the life cycle. And it's important to have the right values ourselves, so usually we're sort of might be having the client's interests at heart. And so as long as that is our goal, rather than to ripple the water and make waves and really sort of annoy people, as long as we're doing it with the best intention, then I don't see a reason why we can't. But it has to be partly on our terms, but also allowing that communication channel to talk to people as to the reasons why you're doing it.
I think it's more than a communication. It sounds like a perception problem. That comparison with cleaning houses was absolutely genius. Like, I have teenage kids. I'm going to complain about them. If my wife overhears me, she's going to lump me in with them because they're teenage boys. And as far as she's concerned, I'm not much better. But they will walk past things on the floor. Like, it's just, they'll eat and then they'll put their plate on the floor and then they will just go on with their lives. And they'll walk past it, around it, over it, whatever. For days and days, if you let them. It's not even a matter of telling them that it's there. It's like, it's just out of their consciousness. It's just every time they go to get food, the bowl fairies and the plate fairies have just magically cleaned and replaced everything they need where they need it. And there's no perception of how that actually happened. It doesn't even register. And I think that's the danger.
There's a sports team analogy as well, isn't there? There are sometimes hidden football players that just
Exactly
they
what I was gonna
communicate
say.
things, they pull strings, they enforce certain the shape and the tactics, and they maybe just do those little tiny things that you don't necessarily see as a casual observer. But when that one player suddenly is removed, the team suddenly just feels really lost, and people can't really see and understand. But all the players around them are aware that that thing has been lost. That glue, that thing that binds them together, that connects them and directs them and gives them that purpose, that value, that why. Why am I doing these things? Where do I need to be? Sometimes that little sort of subtle nudges that happen in those teams is lost, and it isn't always very visible. And in fact, I think
Yeah.
in that instance, if it was really visible, it could be detrimental because then others might see those things. It's very interesting because if it became very visible, the work that glue work was, people may get told to stop doing that thing. That's not your job. And if you're then explicitly told not to do something that you need, that can actually be detrimental. And then you're thinking, but I don't want to operate in the shadows and go behind explicit orders. I hate being told that's not your job. Get in your box, get in your silo and things. That's a tricky one.
The way the article that Chris alluded to was by a lady called Tanya Reilly. I don't even know if she's still on Twitter. I don't know if she's part of the great exodus from Twitter. But you should definitely, if you Google Tanya Reilly glue work, she did a talk on it, but she's done a transcript almost of like the whole talk. So it's like a blog post, and then there's a video at the bottom of her delivering the talk. And the examples that she uses in her talk are extremely cool. She kind of tells this story of a more junior dev who joins a company with her teammates, and it just tells of her adventures and capers doing the glue work and the consequences. And it's like, the thing that stuck out was that what she did was spot problems that hindered the success of the project. Literally, if these things did not get fixed, there would have been a very, very big, tangible, negative outcome to the project. And nonetheless, nobody was tackling it. So this person stepped in, and she, I think there's an example of her helping a conversation that's just going on over email over weeks and weeks, and people are just talking past each other, and then she just gets everybody in the room and says, what are we doing? And it happens, for example. And the person that gets credit for that is the person that was originally in the email chain, not handling it. And then she steps in and handles it, and then steps out, and everything's wonderful. And then he gets the credit for the successful delivery of that thing. That's the problem with glue work. It's not necessarily this big, grandiose thing. It's those little things that Chris was kind of talking about. It's just that little, hey, you shouldn't be there. You should be over there. And now suddenly the whole team is functioning smoothly. And then when it comes to get recognition for that, it's literally invisible. Like somebody else will get the credit for it. And that's annoying as hell. Been in that situation.
Yeah. In that situation, though, if you look at it and analyze it, where's the recognition coming from? Was it the fact that the peers who were in the meeting didn't help and give a thank you for helping us? We hadn't got together. We would never have solved that. Is it the leaders who don't see the glue work at all because they weren't there? They just see the result. So X's responsibility, X got there. Yay. There's a collection of different people with different responsibilities that didn't get a job done, that this person stepped in to help. The recognition should be from the people that were supported, in this case, in my head. The people that she got in the room to solve the question should have gone, thanks for that. Yeah, but we wouldn't have been able to get it done without Joe Bloggs over there and making sure that that book passes.
Yeah, that did happen in the story that Tanya put together. That did happen. It's like, oh yeah, amazing. You do great work and this, that, and the other, and you're amazing, and we couldn't have done it without you. It's just literally when it comes around to review time and they're looking at our protagonist and saying, how good are you at coding? And instead of progressing this much in the 2 or 3 year span, she's progressed this much. I'm now doing hand signs on the podcast. Instead of progressing like 10x, she's now a 10x dev. She's now just a 2.5x dev. And people are like, well, you're not a 10x dev, so you can't get a promotion. It's like, yeah, well, the reason I wasn't writing any code is because I was solving this problem and that problem. And people are like, well, yeah, but, you are a coder and, you haven't really progressed at the coding and this, that, and the other. And it's that analogy. It's that I've seen and felt that as a tester as well. It's like, yeah, well, you could go and help with figuring out why this, debugging this problem in production, but actually we just want you to stay in a test environment and find bugs, log bugs, retest bugs. That's what we would like you to do. But it's not the most powerful thing I could do.
It's the perception of others. Like you say, you've touched on reviews, and my goodness, if you know anything about David does a lot of reviews. But, bless him. But this, I was asked this question once in an interview, like, how would you measure the success of a tester? And I said, well, I personally wouldn't alone be measuring the success of a tester, but these are things I'd be looking at. And sure, I might look at numbers. Maybe I'm looking at interactions with tickets and bugs and all that stuff that's very easily quantifiable numbers that I can go on a tool and find. But I would be, if I'm in an office with folks, I'm seeing how they're interacting and how people are drawn towards them, how they are interfacing with their people. I'm talking to the people in their teams and trying to understand how they're perceived within their own environment and even stakeholders and other things. So you're sort of observing how they work in those places. If you're a senior person, you expect folks to come toward you, a go-to kind of person to help problem solve and to discuss things through and to be invited in to do things, or to your point before, organizing things yourself, bringing people together to make those things happen. And the response I got from the interviewer was, so you would rely on other people to measure the success of a tester? And I said, yes, I would. I did not get that job.
Well, I firmly agree with what you said, Chris, to be quite honest with you. It is about their interactions with the people, and numbers don't show that. And if it's numbers at all, it's the numbers of the whole team. Do the team get more productive rather than the individual? Because that's what they're doing. They're supporting the wider goal versus their individual. They're team players. They're people that are helping the wider good. And yeah, measuring a single metric won't probably spot that unless you measure the team metric, because that's where they're having the impact. And that impact is far more valuable than them becoming slightly better at coding or something, in my view. But they push towards kind of leadership roles and responsibility type roles, usually. Whether they want to or not, that's the next question, really, in my head. Because we see them as people that can solve problems, that can lead, can fix things. We then almost encourage them into different paths towards leadership roles, seniority type thing, where actually they don't really... They do it because it's there, not because they want to do it. They do it because if it's not done, it's more suffering for them. But yeah, it's an interesting one.
So glue work, particularly the way that she described it, is technical leadership. The problem was that people kind of do try and funnel you into an adjacent role because they kind of, the way she described it is like saying, well, to her protagonist in her story, she's like, okay, because you're not as technical, but you're good at all of this other stuff, why don't you go be a project manager? That's all good for you. And you can't, or some other role that's, I'm doing air quotes, that's less technical, right? And so what she was advocating for was, this was in the context of developers, but I guess it applies to pretty much everyone. At least it does to me. It's like, if you really become a deep expert in X and then worry about leadership, I think what she was advocating for is to kind of be very deliberate about that choice. Because if you jump off of a particular track, let's stick with development and testing, or testing, because she was talking about development, we're talking about testing. You can close some doors without realizing it. And that was another big thing with, consequence of this whole glue work scenario. And I think part of the solution is on the individual concerned, annoyingly, but the facts are the facts. Like setting people's expectations from the get-go, as Chris just kind of alluded to, is also risky, but that's what you got to do. You kind of got to say, if you're going to hire me, expect this is what I'm going to do. Like, I'm going to do this. Don't expect me to be staying in the test environment, interacting with the product, logging bugs in our favorite Australian virtual board. Other virtual boards available. I'm going to be talking to people. I'm going to try and get their help. I'm going to try and address it holistically. Like, you should expect that. I've definitely made that mistake before by not setting those expectations, and it's been deemed to be poking my nose into things that don't have anything to do with me. In other environments, it's been welcomed and people have recognized it, but it's definitely bit me in the behind a few times by not doing that. And then the other side of that coin is the people bringing you in need to be they need to be absolutely on the money about setting the expectation and lining that. Like, I've hired this guy, his name's Chris. He's awesome. He's going to be talking and collaborating with all of you. Like, don't expect this dude to just be sat there, heads down, testing, interacting with the product. He's going to be chatting, fixing, addressing, understanding, thinking holistically. And I think people who are hiring quality engineers and experienced testers have a part to play in solving this. I think, like I say, it's early doors for me, in this.
I think you're right. They do have a part to play in it. I think one of the challenges is you can often be hired by somebody and then that person's replaced. So you might have an agreement with, you change teams and then the agreement changes. So you've got to keep resetting that. And sometimes if you're already in the company, then that expectation is just completely blown out of the water. There is literally a mine blown up. And that's where you're kind of into this work to your contract type thing, I think often is when those expectations just clash. Then, what you're going to do as a person, well, I want to do this, you don't want me to do, then I'm going to do the minimum to get by.
I would agree. I think that we as individuals, and as you get more mature, it gets easier, is to be true to your own values. In the interview situation, be yourself. You can't go into a company and not be yourself, because you will break yourself. I would echo Russell's point. I was going to make the same thing, is that the person who champions you to bring you in for that particular thing, you are relying on them to help drive through your vision. And actually, if they get replaced, then there has to be a reset. There has to be another person who is supporting you in what you're doing, because otherwise, as you said, Vernon, it can be perceived as keep your nose out. You're just meddling in stuff that doesn't belong to you. And it's a very fine line. And I would prefer for a company that allowed that flexibility and that freedom rather than try to constrain it. But I also recognize that absolutely, if you are constrained, then most likely you will work to the letter and then probably look for another job where you would add value or are appreciated for the work that you actually do.
It's very interesting, isn't it? Because I was thinking, what about you're a leader or a manager, a leader of people, and you find yourself with a team full of people who are all reeking of the glue. Like, you still have the day job of testing to be done. Like we've talked about how we want culture add, not culture fit, and we want to have this thing, but there are elements of a job that need doing, and if everyone's going off doing these things, I can understand why there can be frustrations. And that's where the visibility of the work is so important, the understanding of a manager that they know what their people are doing, the impact that their people are having, and where perhaps there are detriments and such. It's tricky, because I can imagine a situation where you're doing a lot of glue work, you see the value, you enjoy that work, you want to carry on doing that work. But if you actually did let on to your boss that was what you were doing, they might not like it.
I've had those conversations. I've had the people saying I'm doing this. I'm saying, well, actually, I need you to kind of do a bit more of this. We've got to find the balance between it. I appreciate you love that, but we have this that we've got an expectation on. If we don't do it, no one will. So we've got to do this and fix these problems, and also at least be appearing to do this as well. Because if one thing doesn't move at all, people notice. If it moves slowly, you can get away with murder. But it's kind of making sure things are at least progressing. And I, like you guys, all recognize the fact that fixing the root cause is far better than fixing the leak in the ceiling, like fixing the plaster. You've got to fix what's leaking to start with. And if you don't, then it's just going to keep coming back and back and back. That's wasteful. And I get paid to not be wasteful. That is whatever my job title is, whatever else is, there is an underlying thing in my contract that says I don't waste my employer's money. And it's not in my contract ever, but it is basically work efficiently. And working efficiently is solving the cause, not plastering over things. And a lot of testing can be plastering over things. And the shift in testing has been to go lower, to fix the problems, to find issues earlier, not later. So it is important to have managers that can appreciate it, and obviously coach managers into understanding the value of glue work, but also managers that can balance, I think, between when you have a team of 10 people that maybe are all doing the glue, that also, well, actually, one of you needs to kind of back down a little bit, give a bit of space to do some other things. And it's trying to find the balance and showing the value of that balance. Don't just say, stop doing what you're doing. That's never going to work. But kind of show that actually there's more value. There's multiple value streams that you can generate. And if we stop one, it'll then block us doing others. And we've just got to find the kind of multi-threaded approach to solving it. Because actually, I don't want to sit in a lounge with a horrible stain, if you see what I mean. But at the same time, I do need to try and fix that pipe, but that pipe could take weeks to fix. So it's kind of like, well, can I just put a bit of cloth over it for now so I don't see it and then fix it in the back? So you've got to do some things sometimes to kind of to make things seem better that don't always help there. But it's about finding that balance, because you're working for a company at the end of the day that pays money to do a certain task. And it's about appearances sometimes. It shouldn't be, but often it is. So you need to kind of tick the appearances along a little bit whilst actually investing in fixing the problems, in the glue work, in the communication, getting people together. But you can't be the facilitator of every single meeting for the entire 6 Scrum teams and then do no testing if your job is a tester. You've got lots of value in there, but if you're the only tester, then something else is being dropped and will fail. So it's about trying to help, but not necessarily help 3,000%. You've got to draw a line somewhere. It's bloody awkward to figure out where that line is. We'll wrap this one up. So we've been talking about glue work. I just want to say thank you very much for our special guests, Vernon Richards, and our usual suspects, Chris and David, and say we will see you soon, Simon. I'm sure we'll hear you soon, Simon, since it is a podcast. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you, Ben from Saffron QA. If you want to reach out to us, feel free to reach out to us on our website. You can find us on LinkedIn. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I don't think we're on Mastodon yet still, but that should be changing probably sometime soon. Always looking forward to hearing from you. So thank you once again to all our guests, and thank you for listening to us as well. Adios.
For now, it's goodbye from the testing peers.
Goodbye.